French teachers strike over safety issues after Muslim backlash to nude art. In a small town near Paris, teachers at a school in uh, Issou, I don't know how to pronounce the name of this town, went on strike, voicing deep concerns for their safety after an incident involving the display of a 17th century nude painting by Giuseppe Cesare. The unrest occurred. The arrest comes in the wake of several Islamist attacks on teachers in France, including the horrific beheading of Samuel Paty in 2020. The current situation in Yusu escalated when a female teacher showed the painting Diana and Action to her class, leading some Muslims to turn away, citing religious prohibitions against viewing such imagery. Misinformation and false accusations against the teacher quickly spread on social media, intensifying fears among the staff. Sophie Venetite, I do not know how to pronounce these names. The general secretary of the France's leading teachers union expressed the gravity of the situation, stating, "We know well that methods like this can lead to a tragedy. We saw it with the murder of Samuel Paty. Our colleagues feel threatened and in danger." The strike highlights the growing tensions in French schools, where teachers face not only disciplinary issues, but also threats to their personal safety in a climate of escalating religious and cultural conflicts. So, let me give some background to what happened here. So, there was a teacher who was doing her job in a French suburb, and I don't know exactly what the subject of the class was, if it was art history or whatever, but in this class, she showed a famous painting. And this painting, 17th century painting, had some nude female breasts in it. As is wont to do in a, yeah, here we go. Here we have the painting right here. Okay. Pretty typical 17th century
This is
painting
okay
of
for YouTube, by the way, because it's art, right?
yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Um and a typical painting of, a Greek myth in 17th century style. So, um there were Muslim students in the class that were upset by this, who said, this is against our culture or religion. We're not allowed to see this. This is prohibited, blah, blah, blah. And then, according to the reports that I have read, have gone on to accuse her of racism, accuse her of making racist statements, accuse her of making statements against Islam. And then these rumors started to spread online. And then this teachers decided to go on strike because they were afraid for their safety. Because those of you who know the case will already recognize the pattern. This is almost exactly what happened in the case of Samuel Paty, who was beheaded on the street of Paris suburbs because he showed his class the Charlie Hebdo cartoons. And a student spread a lie against him. A student spread a rumor against him, and it led to this guy who came to France as a Chechen refugee beheading him in the middle of the street, hunting him down and beheading him in the middle of the street. So when we have a situation where this is not even blasphemy against the prophet, this is not even depicting the prophet, not even close. This is just showing a historical nude painting, probably in a freaking history class. And people are saying this is prohibited. I'm not allowed to see this. This is not okay. And then spreading lies against her about her being racist and saying statements against Islam. Yes. And spreading that online, that picking up steam, and then there's calls against her within the community. I would also be freaking terrified, because that's exactly what happened to Samuel Paty. Not to mention the fact that less than 3 months ago, there was another teacher that was murdered in France under the guise of some Islamist motive. His name was Dominique. Shoot, I can't remember his name. And so yeah, the teachers are now going on strike over this, apparently, because they're very concerned for their safety. And I think they have every reason to be very legitimately concerned for their safety. This is not an irrational fear in any way, shape, or form. But Armin, what is your reaction to this?
People are pointing out, Space Leo and some other people were pointing out, like, what about biology class? Because there's nudity when anatomy, like in the anatomy of the human body. Are they going to get offended over that as well? This is weird.
I don't know. Yeah.
And some people were suggesting that France is effed. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, France has a very serious problem on their hands. France has a very serious problem on their hands. And it becomes more and more apparent with instances like this. When it's like, oh yeah, now we have multiple teachers that have been murdered by Islamists because of rumors spread against them. I mean, it's insane. And so our lovely editor D added some reactions on social media, and this is a very spicy this is a spicy take from Twitter. So let's examine what this person on Twitter had to say in reaction to this news. They said attempts to suppress indigenous culture is a violation of Article 8.1 of the United Nations in Declaration on the Rights of the Indigenous Peoples. Quote, indigenous, parentheses, French, have the right to not be subjected to or forced assimilation or destruction of their culture. Now, here's the thing. If you guys didn't know, French people don't count as indigenous.
Why not?
Because indigeneity is a construct that basically only applies to colonized people, but after the 15th century.
Oh, that's pretty selective way of defining it. What the hell? I mean,
because
by
the
definition,
Gauls, the French were colonized by the Romans.
Yeah, I mean that's by definition indigenous.
No,
Why are they legal?
they're not.
Yeah, French people, especially are saying French people are native to France. They are.
But they cannot claim indigeneity.
What the hell? Okay.
By the definition of this very construct.
Okay, that's pretty selective.
I had a very amazing incident a few days ago where I was fighting with ChatGPT over. I was having an argument with ChatGPT about this because I wanted to see what the argument is, right?
Right.
And so I was trolling I was trolling ChatGPT about why the French are not indigenous, but they don't count.
Yes, basically I think they've lived there for thousands of years. How are they not native? I mean, I guess.
But they're not. They are not indigenous because indigenous applies to people that have been colonized following the 15th century, almost overwhelmingly. And then I asked, well, who are the indigenous people to Japan? Well, it said the Ainu. I'm like, well, when were the Ainu colonized? By the Yamato. Oh, around the 7th century. Oh, well, so why is that different? Oh, because it's a very complicated and context-dependent thing. So I said, oh, it sounds like a double standard to me.
I
was just like, well, I'm sorry you feel that way.
I think the actual standard here is that if you're white, you're not indigenous. That's what I think the actual standard is. No, I think it's more about like, oh no, we don't call white people indigenous. That's not what we do.
Yeah, but it's not going to say that.
Oh yeah, but isn't that the actual standard here? Isn't that the actual standard?
I think that's the actual standard. I mean, let's just be completely honest. Sure, there's technically a more nuanced way you could talk about this and blah, 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 blah. But if we're being really real, that's basically what it breaks down to.
That's what it breaks down to. Yeah.
It's so, yeah.
All right. So
oh my gosh. And then especially if you start talking about indigeneity when it comes to the Jewish people, then things start to get real fuego.
Oh yeah, actually that's a good point as well. Yeah, they've been colonized. Yeah, what about that? Are the Jewish people indigenous to Israel? Given that if you're talking about you want to be before the 15th century, yeah, how about 3,000 years ago? Could that be indigenous? Considered indigenous? No.
Like where do people think the name Judea comes from?
Right, 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 right. But
Where
they
the
they
F
look
do people
white.
think the name Judea comes from? It's so freaking stupid. Like,
Yeah, yeah. But again, not that we care about it. I don't care about you being native or not, because at the end of the day, what matters is, the legality of it, and what are we supposed to do to just to make the highest number of people have the best, life and the most prosperity and the most amount of peace. Being native or not native, to me, it doesn't matter to me. But given their standards of them caring about who was native here and who doesn't, they seem to apply that selectively, right? So I
oh,
just want to say that,
funny how that works. Funny how that
yeah,
works.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah,
Because if
exactly. They were
people
colonized
actually
by the Romans,
recognized the indigenous people of that region, then suddenly you could use
right?
the same rhetoric of saying, "What did you think decolonization looked like?
Right, because
What do you think indigenous resistance looks like?" And suddenly they don't like how that rhetoric sounds anymore.
mm,
Hmm.
I mean, it
Hmm.
does pass all the standards. It was before the 15th century, and they were colonized. By so many people. Actually, they were the
Too many
most
to name.
colonized. Yeah, too many to name. Last one. Yeah. All right. So we have 3 super chats from Gagin American. And guys, again, and thank you for the super chats. This video is very likely to get demonetized. So your super chats are really helping us out, making sure that we keep the show, fully funded. So Susie, do you want to check out the super chats by
Oh,
Gagin
yes.
American? There's 3 of them. Yeah.
Gation American, thank you for all the super chats.
Mm.
Saying, could I show Tara sitting on Buddha on YouTube? I think so. I think you can, especially like the really old style, like Tibetan art. I think that'd be fine.
Mm.
Um, Gasian American is also saying the Celtic people of Britain would count, except they don't, because I also asked ChatGPT about that. They don't.
They don't count. What the?
No.
Okay, it's based on skin color. It's skin deep. The analysis is
And
is
I
based
was
on.
specifically asking about the Scots. I said, "Well, are the Scots the indigenous people of Britain?" And basically went on to say, "No, they're not." Because it's like, well, indigenous refers to a culture that has its own distinct image in the face of colonized powers. It has its own culture. It has its own language. I'm like, are you ignoring the fact that the Scots have all those things? That's very offensive. And it's like, I'm sorry you feel that way.
Oh wow!
The
I'm
Scots have
sorry you
a
feel that.
very stark identity in opposition to British rule, force, and power. To say others is insane. It's insane.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what?
Sa Sami,
Yeah.
Basque, and Gaelic peoples count as indigenous, except I also asked about the regional identities of Spain, for example. And it said, "No, they're not
Mm,
indigenous, that's a regional identity." Like, they
mhm,
have
mhm,
their own
mhm.
language. They have their own identity in relation to the dominant social structure, which is what you said was one of the qualifying criteria of being indigenous. It's so freaking stupid. And also, I have heard that the Sami actually arrived in the regions in which they now reside actually later than the Finnish people themselves. I don't know if that's true, but I have questions.
I think that it's great that ChatGPT. I used to get angry that ChatGPT is woke, but I think now it's a good way to figure out how the woke thinks. Every time you want to figure out what are the arguments, the gymnastics people have to go through to try to make sense of these. Do you know who makes the most amazing, gorgeous, and other adjectives that I can't use here on YouTube, blasphemous art ever? We do! And for some reason, we are giving it away for free. Download them now using the link in the description before we change our mind.